Okay. Alright. Louis, you're live, man. For all the world to hear.
It is? Yeah. Okay, Nova can start. We're live.
Start talking again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alright. Hello, everybody. We're going to start the meeting. Thank you all so much for being here, especially the students among you that came on midterm week. That's probably why. Oh, yes, and there are sandwiches over here that you should all have donated by Bryn, who's just absolutely awesome to do that.
Yay,
So just feel free anytime to come in and grab any. Don't worry about it. Just like flopping it in one time. So I'll just like always, I'll jump into the announcements. So the first announcement is not cybersecurity related, but you should definitely take Monday to vote. Okay, we all know it's important. It's reading week for a lot of you as well, so there literally is like no excuse. You just have to go vote.
They're all reading.
What's that?
They're all reading.
Go and out, okay? Just go. Obviously, you know, it's very, very important, and you know, like at least for me, like it's very important as well. So I don't know if any of you guys know this, but like I'm from Syria, and we have, you know, one of the worst governments in the world, and you guys have just an incredible society over here, and it's just so wonderful to be part of it, and it's really, really important because your vote counts, and over there it doesn't, right? And so, you know, realize the impact of that, and please go vote. You know, if not for this country, but for everybody else around the world, okay? Because you do help out, and Canada helps out everywhere. So the second announcement is, so we have like a ton of workshops planned for November. So I'm just gonna like release the schedule. It's really good. There's like a mixture of things for beginners, and then there are things that are catered more towards like third and fourth years. So if you're a little bit more experienced, don't be like discouraged to go to all of them. You can. You probably won't be able to, but I mean that's the point. Just pick and choose. I kind of had to make a decision here as to just do like 2 workshops, right, and try to market them as hard as possible and try to get you all to go to them, or to have a lot of workshops, right, and then let you choose. And I felt that it would be better to let you choose. And also, I didn't want to discourage the absolute like 15 to 20 people that came to me and said, hey, I want to do a workshop. So I've selected like 5 of them here, and next semester we're going to have even more. So there's like things on assembly, soldering, lockpicking. There's a lot more coming, and I really hope that you guys take the time to go, because honestly, like we're running a curriculum at this point. A lot of these are student-led, and I've imposed 2 requirements on them. One, the workshop has to be really interactive. They have to have at least 3 exercises they're going to be walking you through. Adam has this already implemented, and so does Spencer. I saw him working on it today, and they're also going to give you things to take home. Right? A quick rundown of sort of what we have. So November 1st, we're going to have a meeting, and it's just going to be the news roundup, and then we're going to have an intro to Git with Adam. So quick round of applause.
Yay! Oh yeah, I haven't presented yet.
Okay. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Spencer Lee, who's a student in 3rd year, is going to be doing Smashing the Web, SQL injection, and cross-site scripting. It's meant to be like super beginner friendly. Please come. He's like a really nice guy who really knows what he's talking about. He's the sort of guy that just can like code a whole app in like an hour and a half. And believe me, like I saw him do this. It's incredible. Yeah, Spencer is amazing. Then we have Jason Hong and Ken, who are going to be doing Beware the Malware, a gentle introduction to malware analysis, which is probably the most horrible name I've ever seen in my life. But they're really good. They actually solved a ton of the Flare challenges this year, and they're going to be like walking you through some of them. You do need to know like a little bit of C, a little bit of assembly to kind of understand where they're going. You don't need to know like a ton, but it is something that is required. I'm not going to impose a limit on any of the student-led workshops. As many of you as possible can go. I'll probably be there at most of them, and I'll have volunteers that kind of help out to give you a good experience, right? And you can see that the dates for these workshops, some are on Friday, some are on Wednesday, right? It was just impossible to schedule them always on a Friday, but I tried to kind of stay cognizant of the fact that many of you are alumni or industry professionals, and you still might want to come, right? So we did put them on evenings for you. And then the really stay tuned to your email and the Discord, so that when we do push that out, if you really want to be in this workshop, that you sign up for it.
For the malware ones, there's a couple really good online courses if people want to get an idea of what they're going to kind of be talking about, and maybe it'd be a good idea. I'll throw you a couple links for the stuff that might help people get an introductory to assembly and to malware analysis.
So yeah, if you actually just want to share those with me, I can post them later. And actually, another fun fact about the malware ones, they're going to be following. It's actually a student-created course on GitHub. It's done by ISSessions. So that's what they're going to be following. I looked through the slides, and it's it starts off with really simple stuff and builds from there. So it's going to be great. We'll be there. We'll try to share as many resources.
Do you like different camera lenses? Yes. Oh, is that fake?
No, you can.
Yeah,
They're like little red lenses for camera.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Yep. So going along with some of the privacy stories, Twitter got a little bit of slack because if you have used some of their 2FA mechanisms, one of them is SMS or text message based multi-factor authentication. So when you would log in, it would text you a code, you enter the code. If you're not using something like Google Authenticator, Twitter got in trouble though because it turned out that they were also using the phone number that you provided for two-factor authentication to sell to marketing agencies to target you with advertising.
Probably not a great idea.
Yeah,
especially since you don't want people's accounts pwned.
Yeah, definitely. So. Also, in Canada, it kind of goes against one of the stipulations in PIPEDA, which kind of says, hey, if you're going to collect people's information, you have to tell them what you're going to use it for, and you can't use it for stuff outside of that. If you do, you have to get them to okay that. Our contract's written to kind of be vague like that. Yeah, maybe kind of sort of, but that's not great. That was the thing. People got mad at them for it. We got another article on the same thing.
Okay.
Twitter had comments on it as well. That's off the Twitter site. They were like, yeah, this is a thing.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this is kind of interesting. Well, actually, a few people have been saying that this should be implemented. So executives should be held accountable legally for jail time, possibly jail time for major vulnerability breaches or breaching of privacy. So they're proposing the bill called Mind Your Own Business Act. And for example, they're mentioning about Mark Zuckerberg taking privacy more seriously, for example, for the Cambridge Analytica incident. So yeah, they're saying we'll see whether it actually becomes law. So,
yeah, interesting idea. It's kind of they're pivoting off an idea that happened after a big load of fraud in the U.S. that gave rise to a piece of legislation called Sarbanes-Oxley. If you've taken the auditing course, hopefully you talk about that. But the idea was that now chief financial officers could be liable if their company engaged in a bunch of fraud and had bad information on their financial statements. This is kind of doing the same thing, but to tech orgs and other orgs from a privacy perspective. Because Sarbanes-Oxley kind of worked. There was a little bit less fraud because there was actual real penalties that executives could face. So maybe is this going to be a thing? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it is.
But most executives aren't very technical. So expecting them to be able to follow technical stuff may not be. But you never know. Okay, and then there was this one.
Oh yeah. Wild. So again, just going on the privacy stream. So this celebrity in Japan had a lot of pictures on her website and other locations, but was apparently pretty cautious about their OPSEC. They were a difficult person to track down and find out where they lived because they have obviously a lot of fans and a lot of those are potential stalkers. But apparently one super stalker quote fan. Basically took pictures where her eyes were in the pictures and zoomed in on her eyes to look at the reflections of the surroundings in her eyes and figured out where she lived based on that. So like, hey, I see some scenery that's pretty consistent in like these pictures. She must live near like this park or be near these buildings, and was able to track down stuff. So now I guess put on sunglasses when you take selfies.
Well, sunglasses
No, that's
reflect
even
even
worse.
worse.
Yeah, no, never mind. Don't do what I
I
just
learned that when
said.
playing cards.
Yeah,
Putting them into like Google Lens.
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
Wear
Well, wasn't there
contacts that are
when
reflective?
geotagging became more popular? Like I think a few people got caught with that as well. So
Yeah. God, close your eyes when you take selfies. That's the new thing, I guess.
Put on like a privacy filter for like Snapchat and Instagram.
Yeah,
It just removes any, like refuzzes everything.
yeah, that's true.
yeah. But then you can't get that crisp picture.
Yeah,
So
The fuzzy look has been the Instagram.
oh, fair.
is it okay?
It's been 6 months, so it's about time for the government to say, hey, we want backdoors in all crypto again. That's all.
Yeah.
They're just trying to push it again. Governments around the world be like, yo, we need a way into your cryptos to safeguard the children's. That's all. It just comes up again. However, slightly related to that, a bunch of stories about people's conflicting opinions from experts and privacy folks and all kinds of other stuff on DNS over HTTPS, which is basically where you issue your DNS queries, meaning, hey, you have this domain name, I want to know what your IP address is. That's essentially a DNS query. But doing it over encrypted, basically web traffic, in attempts to kind of hide your DNS queries from maybe your ISP, or where some people are getting extra concerned from like your work's network security monitoring team. Maybe that's why you might do that. There's a lot of opinion out there on this. There's some pretty
been
long
a few
essays.
implementations as well, hasn't there been?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of people or DNS service providers that are offering this right now, like Cloudflare.
Yeah.
And I think, does Google do that?
Do
Google.
they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, a lot of the network security folks are like, you're prohibiting us from seeing a lot of the DNS queries, meaning we can't see outbound requests from like malware going to command and control servers. How will we find these servers and take them down if we can't see the DNS queries and stuff like that? And other people are saying, no, there's other ways to get that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
Well, it's the
take a
same with
stand on either
HTTPS
side.
for web traffic, right? There's
Yeah.
a way around it as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think this is one of yours too.
Yeah, again, same thing. Government's like, yo, we need to backdoor the crypto. Can't have end-to-end communication encrypted channels because of the children. Normally it was like because of the terrorism, but now they're like, oh, we can catch them on other ways, so now they're going with their last chance resort, which is usually always think of the children. Yeah.
Oh, this is kind of funny. This is kind
Yeah.
of like a funny kind of mailing list.
Yeah.
But,
So someone
yeah.
apparently some hacker claimed that they had breached the Tom Shoes website for a while, and just emailed the entire company's like customer mailing list saying, "Yo, you all spend way too much time on the internet and in front of screens and stuff. You should like chill and take a break." It's still kind of like a hackery stunt. It's like
Yeah.
website defacement, but like. Nicer website defacement. Still
Yeah,
illegal.
yeah.
Still not cool, but
Okay, but what if this was just viral marketing and it wrapped up in, with pythons and go for a walk?
whoa,
Oh.
it's actually not a bad idea.
I thought it would be related to the subscribe to PewDiePie thing, like in town, but you never know.
Well, you're hired. You already have a job, but you're hired.
Oh yeah, okay, so there's this one. So basically, there was a bug that was discovered where basically what happened was basically with sudo you can if you have sudo access you can impersonate another user. You can switch to the user. But the reason why you would give people sudo access is so that you don't have to give them root access, but you can still give them a little bit of like privileged access. And so as a result, the bug result. So basically, what the bug was if you ran a command, which I saw in I had a different article with this one, but in any case, if you run a command with a -1, so that's the root user ID. So then you can switch to the root with that.
So the way it worked, you're like basically there. With sudo, you can specify which user ID you want it to run as, and it had a little bit of a bug where it didn't do like bounds checking. So -1 or the biggest positive integer you can have in a 32-bit unsigned integer, and it just didn't process that number very well. So it would accidentally let you run a command as root if the sudo config file says you can run this command as anybody except root. And if you gave it those user IDs, you say, I want to run it as user this user, then it would be like, oh, you mean you want to run it as root? Cool, awesome, you can do the thing. Apparently, though, that it's like really rare to have that config in your sudo file. You have to have a thing that says like run it as not root, but nobody actually does that. Just like nobody actually cleans these whiteboards.
Okay.
That was probably
sudo.
the one that you
Yeah, so there's an example right there. So
Yeah.
for example, this would be Bob, and then you can run anything except root, and you can run Vim as anyone but not root. So it doesn't affect. So like Nick said, it only affects like a small portion if you have a custom setting.
Yeah. Whoever sets up sudo needs to know this. So
Exactly.
like nobody. Whoa, sorry. Make that more bigger. Chromium, which is like the sort of open source project that's at the root of Chrome and a bunch of other web browsers, posts some pretty cool improvements and security stuff on their blog sometimes. So recently, they claim they've made really big improvements in what they call site isolation. So rewinding a little bit, one of the cool things about Chrome and now all of the other browsers is that every time you had a tab open, Chrome would treat every individual tab as its own process. Your operating system does really good process isolation, meaning one tab couldn't read the stuff in another tab. Operating systems separate that out really, really well, and they kind of merge that into the behavior of your web browser. But they decided that's even like not going far enough. Now we're going to make it so that every single website you visit in one of those tabs is also now isolated in its own process, thus inheriting all of the operating system's protections on process isolation. Really like tricky thing to try to do, but they claim that they've done it. The desktop Chrome will do it for all sites you go to, whereas if you like use Chrome on an Android device or something like that, it will only do it for websites where you had to supply a password, meaning sensitive sites. That's how they figure out if a site is sensitive or not, because it does require a lot of extra computation and overhead, and they didn't want to drain your battery too fast. So they're like, well, on mobile, we'll just do it for these sites. Really cool, though, should help in a lot of instances where, you know, maybe there's like some kind of browser compromise on a particular website. Now it will be even more constrained and more difficult to break out of that and compromise the device by visiting a malicious website. Cool.
If it feels any more slower, just download more RAM.
Yeah, just download all the RAM. Downloads ram.com. This person, Wilbur, I don't know who they are, but I saw this article, it was badass. They have posted their findings on what happens if you put up a honeypot to capture Windows remote desktop protocol connections. And they posted all of their findings throughout this. And basically their conclusion, it's cool. You should go read this one, not that you're going to read. But
Is it a long write-up or no?
No, it's kind of just a fun read. Just it talks about the different attacks that they saw against Windows RDP. But basically their conclusion was ultimately, if you ever leave the Windows Remote Desktop Protocol exposed to the internet, people will brute force it 24/7 until they get in. You will see all kinds of crazy attempts at exploits thrown at it. So if you want to collect the newest RDP exploits, awesome, throw up a honeypot and you'll have them all real soon. It's just a cool, this person just decided to run an experiment with their honeypot kind of story, maybe encourage some other folks to try running one of their own.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, we were on the news. Don't play the audio because then you'll hear me talking and nobody wants that. But our program got featured on CBC's The National, which is a national news program. That's badass. That's great. Also, one of our alumni, Atlanta, was in the video as well. That's cool. I just had the video in there to remind me to say that. Hopefully that means good things for all you folks because people are going to be like, hey, this is a program. And also, someone... There's an awesome line right at the end of this video where Steffi says you'll be amazed at what you might see, and then if you look in the background. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. I didn't get fired, so I think we're okay. We're good. Awesome. Is this one yours or one of mine?
No, this is one of yours.
Okay, cool. So there is apparently a... did I even read this one? I must have read this one. There's an old bug in Wi-Fi. I forgot what... Oh, yeah.
Good Linux.
Yeah. In one of the drivers, because drivers are hard to write. There was an old school actual, like, not heap overflow, but buffer overflow vuln in a driver for some series of Wi-Fi cards in Linux. These Realtek Wi-Fi cards. Not great. Luckily, like traditional buffer overflows are pretty well mitigated in modern instances of Linux, so it'd be really hard to pull off. But if you have local access to the machine and you're just looking to do privilege escalation, it might work. Yeah, not great.
Yep. That's what years ago.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the Samsung Galaxy 10 probably has issues apparently where like lots of fingerprints will work for the fingerprint ID. Because they tried something different. The new Galaxy 10s, instead of using like cameras and stuff to, or a capacitive sensor to read your fingerprint, they're apparently using an ultrasonic sensor, meaning it's sending like audio waves and sound waves at your fingerprint and somehow recording it that way. Apparently, if you have their screen protector on the phone, it's fine. But if you have like an aftermarket screen protector on your phone when you register your fingerprint, it's kind of fuzzy in that it will allow other people's fingerprints who maybe are somewhat similar to yours to work on your phone. So is this a genius way of making you buy their screen protector? Maybe.
Well, it would make
It came with it by default, I believe.
The
Screen protector, yeah.
oh, so the one it was coming
And they
with,
knew it was going to be a problem. They were like, make sure you use like a fingerprint.
like a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's more detail about it on Graham Cooley's blog too. He goes more into the tech behind how their actual fingerprint scanner works.
Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense a little bit because it's such a close distance with the sonar, so probably that may have something to do with it.
Could be neat, interesting, something to keep in mind when you see other biometric stuff coming up. Finfisher, which is one of those sketchy spyware applications that bad groups sell to oppressive governments to use. The people who wrote this malware actually got upset at German journalists and are trying to sue them by saying, hey, you wrote an article about our evil malware and you didn't ask us for comment first, which is actually against German journalism practice. You can sue people for that. So the fact that these people are, I don't know, it's just funny. Yeah.
I can't wait for them to show up in court.
I know. It's kind of like that one where like the drug dealer was like, yo, but he tried to shoot me because I didn't give him drugs. And they're like, and? Yeah. Depressing results on a survey of American citizens, and we're just going to extend this to North American citizens because we're probably all in the same boat. People were not making great scores on a generic quiz about cybersecurity. People were able to answer questions about like what is phishing quite well, but when it came to stuff about two-factor authentication or what does net neutrality mean or what's HTTPS, people didn't answer very well. It's not their fault, that's our fault. We have to do better at that. So really, really think about your security education and awareness campaigns if you get involved in that kind of work, because obviously we want not most people to fail a quiz about cybersecurity and by extension privacy and all that other good stuff. This one is
Oh yes. Okay. So basically what happened was this was the VPN one? Yes. Okay. So basically the NSA is warning VPN admins to patch because there's been it was discovered a month-old security bug, and they're claiming that a state-sponsored hacking group has been popping the VPNs that have been unpatched. So basically what the exploit does is it's a remote takeover, and then they can do connection hijacking, and if you're running a VPN, probably you don't want your traffic snooped, so there's that. Yeah, and then... And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, sorry. The exploit for this vulnerability is available on Metasploit and GitHub, so it's freely available as well. So yeah,
nice.
Kind of surprising.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there was the 5G. So basically, there was a group of people that telcos and some academics have raised concerns about the British following the US's stance on Huawei equipment in regards to 5G. And they make some interesting points in regards to that it may hurt economic progress. So kind of the decision of we encounter this a lot in security. The decision of business wanting to make money, and then security as well. So kind of just wanted to point that out. So yeah, that's about it for that. Oh yes, okay. So basically, there's going to be a speaker at C3ism, and basically a security researcher, what he did was in his basement, he recreated the hardware hack in what happened with Micro about a year ago.
The alleged.
The alleged. The alleged.
That was never proved.
Yep, that was never proved. And so basically what he did was he modified a Cisco firewall and he bought a small microprocessor and he soldered it onto the Cisco firewall switch and kind of gain control that way. So, and he did it with under $200. So actually he included the hot air soldering tool, and that was $150, and he only bought the chip for about $2. So pretty cheap too. Yeah, and he said he could have made it smaller, but he chose not to because he wants to show it off. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess in theory it's possible. Is this practical on a large scale industrial deployment and manufacturing line? A lot harder to do. You need a lot of people in on your malicious thing to be able to actually pull that off.
They need the right type of access for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, allegedly, I got that one right this time. Allegedly, Iranian linked ATP group called Charming Kitten. So they've been linked to Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. So they were first observed about a year ago. Basically, they've escalated the volume of their phishing emails and increased its impersonation vectors. So basically, they're not mass targeting, they're targeting mostly academic research, human rights people, and people like that, more for political kind of stuff. And basically, their attack vector is they use password recovery impersonation of the secondary email, and they'll use that for spear phishing emails. So they're targeting like Microsoft, Google, and Yahoo accounts, and also some spear phishing in regards to SMS. So, yeah.
Serious again.
Yes, Fin7. Okay, so this was a cybercrime group, and there was a big crackdown back in 2018 where 3 of its members were arrested. And it looks like they've retooled, so they have a new dropper now called Boost Right, and basically it uses evasion techniques because they have a valid certificate. Because usually, if for inspections, if for example they have an invalid certificate, then it'll go through a more serious stance. It'll go through more filtering rules, but if it has a valid certificate, sometimes they'll let it through more easily. And then there's also a payload that they've added, and it impacts remote IT administration tools to support payment processing applications. So they're staying to their roots in regards to POS systems and popping like restaurant, casinos, and hotel POS systems. And their initial entry is through a fish. So yeah. Imperva database. So basically, there's a security vendor called Imperva, and they have like a WAF, so web application firewall they sell, and in the cloud version as well, runtime application, sandbox, and also a DLP solution. So they had basically what happened was they had a misconfigured AWS compute, so they had a big flood of customers, and so they needed more compute, so that's why they moved to the cloud, because you just pull out your credit card and you get as much compute as you want. And so the issue with that is they had a misconfigured AWS compute instance that hackers were able to gain access to, where they were able to find an AWS administrative API key. So with an API key, you can't log into the server, but you can make requests to it. So it's kind of like a programmatic way of interacting with a program, in this case AWS, so you can programmatically configure AWS stuff. And using that technique, they were able to gain access to a database snapshot, so not a live database, but a backup. And they were able to gain emails, hashed and salted passwords, and also some customer API keys and TLS keys. And the TLS keys is quite concerning, because then that allows the attackers to impersonate websites. So kind of serious in the TLS stuff. So yes, okay, so macOS Catalina privacy and security features you should know. So basically Wire released this article. macOS Catalina has been released, and they have some nice security features. So basically there's data protection features. So basically, like with iOS and Android, anytime an app wants permission, it'll ask you for explicit permission. So by default, it's deny, which is good. Basically, so if you want access to, if an app wants access to your iCloud or documents and stuff, you have to give it explicit privileges, which is nice. So it gives you more control over that. Also, it requires explicit permissions for recording keystrokes and recording screen. So good stuff. And also, they did some backend changes, so the OS lives now in a separate partition, so it's isolated in that regards. So that's nice. And also for Safari, so Safari will notify people if it detects a weak password. So it kind of gives that prompt. So that's actually pretty nice because then you get that instant feedback of when users are entering or setting a password. Just a reminder. You know what? That's pretty good. Also for mail, it'll block. You can set block senders. So instead of going to junk, it goes straight to trash. And then there's also some time limits. So I kind of see it more as like a parental controls feature. Where like if you set a time limit for your kid for the Mac, then it'll log off if they hit that limit. There's also Gatekeeper, so there's a Mac antivirus. They said that it's improved, and also one of the things that they've changed is it'll scan programs consistently instead of just the first time that it's been started. So to prevent because some malware, for example, will sit idle for a set amount of time and then it'll execute, so probably targeting that. There's also they announced at, I believe it was the developer conference. Yes, thank you. Developer conference. So they're bringing the Find My iPhone feature to all its Apple products. So for the Mac, iOS, and iPadOS. So basically, how it works is even if the device is turned off, it'll keep sending pings, low energy Bluetooth pings to nearby iOS devices. So it doesn't require cell towers. It just requires a mesh of iPhones and Apple devices, which seem pretty common. So pretty cool in that regards. I'm sure it'll definitely make it more difficult to steal iPhones, hopefully. And then also there's a secure activation lock. So basically they're adding the T2. They've done this for the past 2 years, but they've added the T2 chip to the Mac as well. So the security enclave. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff there. Yes. Okay. So with this, yes, that was this one. Okay. So basically, actually, some folks at Deloitte, Adam and Mindy, discovered that a lot of quite a few mobile apps have implemented Tor to route their traffic, but the developers didn't realize that even though they assume that if you route traffic to Tor, it's encrypted, whereas that's correct, but once it leaves the network, it's not encrypted. So that's basically what happened, where the app developers would route their traffic to Tor, and then if they just monitored an exit node, they were able to catch HTTP traffic or unencrypted traffic once it left. So probably not great. And so when they looked at the traffic, they found like some GPS coordinates of users, keystroke information, browsing habits, telephone usage data, telecom, country code, so a lot of PII, personally identifiable information. And yeah, so the hypothesis is that app developers thought that they were using Tor and it'll encrypt their traffic, but as they saw, that's not fully correct. And so yeah, I think there's one more.
I think I accidentally opened this one twice. What's the last one?
Okay, fair enough. So yeah,
all right, cool.
That covers the news segment.
Nice. Yay, news.
And then I believe we have Rick. Oh yeah, we have.
Am I next?
Yes, you are. You're next.
Thanks, Brandon. Repo rundown.
Oh my, thanks a lot. Okay. So this week, I made everybody read Python code for the last few weeks, so I thought I'd take something a little bit easier. It's midterm week, everybody's tired, so we're going easy mode. We're going to look at a program called Bash Shark, which is a sweet kind of word mash of Bash and Shark. It's meant to be a post-exploitation kit written only in Bash. Post-exploitation means you've broken into a system already. Now you got to do stuff. This is where you get loot and pillage the machine you've just hacked into. under contract, obviously, because you're doing a pen test. You're not doing this illegally. And so yeah, that's what this thing's meant to be. It's just one gigantic bash script that just gives you a lot of cool functions that you can run in the terminal that you've now collected. And I just wanted to showcase a couple of the functions because it's really easy stuff that I think a lot of you could figure out, like commands you'd probably be familiar with, but the way this person structured it was kind of cool. Also, sick logo. So what is it? I just ripped this from the GitHub page. Aids pen testers and security researchers during post-exploitation phase of security audits. Basically, all you got to do is grab that script. You can grab it right off GitHub when you land on a machine that you want, or however you can force this script onto the platform that you've compromised. Then you just run source bashshark.sh. This is effectively like rerunning like your .bashrc or your .login file. It will basically take everything in this script, which is a bunch of functions, and load them into your shell, so to speak, so that you have access to these functions. It also has a built-in help menu. What's even cooler, it doesn't have any kind of dependencies, nothing like that, single script. The person, the author's written it so that it works, oh, sorry, I didn't do author, my bad, by the second son. Okay, go find him on GitHub, it's right there. Works with Unix, OS X, Solaris if you use that. Kind of cool. It also comes with its own cleanup routine, which is badass. The second you exit this thing, it will look for all the files and modifications you've made since you loaded the script and remove them for you without you having to keep track of it, which is awesome. If you've ever done a pen test and had to remember all the stuff that you left around in an environment and then had to go clean it all up, it's a pain in the ass. So the fact that the script does it for you is kind of cool. But basically all it does is add a bunch of functions to your shell so that you can just type these new function names and get cool behavior. It also has tab completion. The first line of the file is /bin/bash because it's literally a big bash script, and the author has the version set at 1.0. The function snapshots I'm going to show you have a lot of debug and like testing stuff stripped out for the sake of brevity. First off, at the top of the file, though, it's awesome because this tool is all color-coded, and I love when people color-code bash scripts. It's amazing. He's even got this transition-y color piece, and yeah, just shortcuts for color-coding terminal stuff, I always think is extra swaggy, along with the ASCII art logo. Love it. Anyways, the actual functions, things it does. One grabs you a list of all the users on the system just by querying the etc. password file and letting you know who you are. Probably kind of useful. So the idea is this is a sample function that it would load into your terminal for you. So now you can just type USRS and you'll just get that really nice user password list that they've kind of taken and formatted for you along with your own info. All of the functions also come with usage instructions as well, right? And as well as a description of what it actually does. Another one, get app, returns all the installed apps for you. So you just say get app. You can even apply a regular expression as a filter. So if you want to know if like certain apps are installed. Basically, all it does is it takes your path environment variable and dumps it into effectively a for loop, and it just loops through all those directories in your path, listing all of the applications in it for you. Kind of cool. Another one, reverse shell, just basically builds you a really simple shell, like a reverse remote connection from the system you've just compromised back to some other location that you might have. Takes a host and a port. Basically, how does this work? It effectively just kind of ties bash to a random TCP port through this one-liner right here. So it basically says, yo, start reading, like run bash, but read standard input from this TCP port. That's kind of cool. Timestamp, it's basically a glorified front end to the Unix touch command. So you say timestamp, a date, and a file, and it will basically set the date and time on the file you specify to whatever you want. So it just runs touch. It's kind of cool because if you're a bad guy and you're manipulating a file, but you want to make it look like you haven't changed it since a certain date, that's what you would use timestamp for. Kind of cool. Port scan, really simple port scanner. Doesn't work on a lot of variants of Unix because you have to have one that has the TCP devices laid out like this. But basically, it scans the local machine just by asking the TCP ports if they're open. And the author just has this giant array of TCP port numbers. I had to trim it here because it just keeps going and going. And it just says, hey, is this open? Is this open? Is this open? And then it prints you out a little list. So it's like doing a local port scan without running Nmap or any third-party tool. It's literally using the echo command and the devices. So this thing needs nothing to do a port scan. It's kind of cool. You just type I, which I guess stands for info, and it gives you a stupid amount of information about the device or the machine that you've just landed on. So all kinds of OS kernel version information, local IP. It even reaches out to this service that I didn't realize. Like I always go to whatismyipaddress.com, but this is way nicer because it gives you like plain text, what is my outward world facing IP. So if you just W get this guy, that's cool. See, I even said that right here. Then it also checks for a bunch of stuff you might want to know if you're going to run local exploits, like is ASLR or address space layout randomization turned on? It checks that and it lets you know, is data segment randomization turned on? Yes or no. These things will make sense to you when you learn to write exploits, maybe next semester in C or software development. Then it just prints out a giant report for you of all kinds of just local system information, like how much RAM is free, how much RAM is there. It runs that port scan thing. It gives you all that kernel information, gives you details about the network and Ethernet drivers and the storage that's available. So it's just a convenient way of running a bunch of commands that you might have run yourself by typing the letter I. Cool, convenient. I like convenience. Memexec. If you run this one, it will basically go to a URL you specify, grab a script that's there, and like run it in memory without it hitting the file system. This is all the hotness right now in the malware world, so this is how you might do something like that in Linux. It's basically into an environment variable. We grab we curl the contents of whatever script you provided was, and then just run it. So that's basically how you get in-memory only execution in Linux of like a bash script. That's kind of cool. And then you don't leave traces locally for the forensic people to find, because darn forensic people. Then when you run quit, basically, as you've been doing all this, under the hood, it's also been keeping track of any files that you did create, or any modifications or directories or temporary working stuff that you made. So if you just say quit, it basically iterates over its list of those files and removes them. It wipes the bash history for your user. And if you pass it a -F switch, it will also just launch a fork bomb to brick the machine on your way out the door. Because screw you and the horse you rode in on. Like literally. There's it launching the fork bomb right there. That's just awesome. It comes with like a ton of other functions that I knew in a few minutes I would not have a chance to go through. But like since this is all just plain bash script, it's very accessible. If you passed intro Linux, you can go and read these little scripts and figure out what they do. But there's one that checks to see if there's config files present locally for things like an SSH server, DNS, SMB, so you can get an idea of the kind of services that this machine is running. ISVM asks the CPU info file, are you a virtual machine? Because sometimes it's nice to know that. If you find, actually, when you log in that you're in some kind of restricted lockdown shell, if you type escape or ESC, it'll actually try a bunch of different like programmatic type shells to break you out of that environment. So awk and Perl and Ruby and Python shells effectively to get you out of that restricted or jailed environment. Good if you're doing a CTF. Get perm runs a whole bunch of find commands. Basically it says like, hey, what files on the system can I read? What's world writable? What has like the sticky bit? What has the set UID bit set? And it returns you a list of all those, saving you from having to type really long, stupid find commands because nobody ever remembers the syntax, including myself. This one is kind of neat. Find RE, I guess. It runs a bunch of regular expressions on files you pass it to look for common juicy bits of info. Again, if you do a post-exploitation exercise as part of a pen test, you start hunting for stuff to show off in your report. Like, oh, we found all these credit card numbers, we found these passwords. So you run this thing, and it'll basically search all the files on the local file system and return things like email addresses, IP addresses, credit card numbers, things that look like passwords, because it looks for files that have the word password followed by a colon in it and stuff like that. A brute force command that basically just tries to brute force zip and RAR archives that it finds locally. Maybe that's useful. This was a cute feature, but it's really out of date. You type CVE, and what this thing does is it checks the kernel version of the Linux distro, and then it compares it to a hard-coded list of CVEs or exploits for that Linux kernel version. But like the most recent one in this list is from like 2008. So maybe good for older servers. JShell gives you a JavaScript shell, if you want that. Shellcode will actually write you a simple little C program if you've decided you're going to run some shellcode. I don't know. Port block is kind of mean. You write port block and then like a port number, and basically it will block all the external TCP ports on that machine except the port number you specify. So if you like took over this machine, you just want to lock everybody out, except for your own reverse shell. You say port block, and then the port you just made your own reverse shell on. Now you're the only one that gets into that server. And it's just using, again, all using built-in commands like IP tables and stuff. Super cool. And the last one that I can't see because the slide thing. Oh, persist. Basically, you say persist, you give it like a shell command, and it will dump that into the machine's rc.local file. When a Linux server boots, it runs all the commands that are present in rc.local. These last two require that you have root permissions. That's it. Cool. I don't know. It's just neat. And if you ever load this thing up, like if you go to the GitHub repo and open it, there's only one file here. Well, there's like the logo and stuff. But like, I mean, there's the software license, the README page, the logo, and all that kind of junk. But really, it's one file. It's this like 1,200 line bash script. And again, like here's the help file. There's all those sick colors. So it's just one file. It's really easy. It zips down really, really small too. So if you could like pull it down onto a machine somehow. Yeah. And that's it for the repo for this week. Thanks. Jamie.
Do like a 5-minute break while Jamie sets up.
That OSX patch and the new one caused me a living nightmare because it applies to system apps too. So things like terminal. Or like, hey, I can't read into the user's library directory. Why the hell can't I do this? And I spent 40 minutes. No touch to you.
I assume I just tap the right side.
No. You want these ones?
Yeah. I've got to slide it down though.
Oh, it's on
chained.
this one.
You can do the
Mention volatility 3.
Oh, junk.
Oh, that's
I can't
true.
believe I forgot that. I am slacking. Yep. Nice. Jamie's doing his bit, and then you're up. We're a few minutes behind, so you're good.
Solid. I'm gonna actually sit down.
Let me just make sure that you come up on the nice.
And you duplicate or extend? Let's find out. There, it's extended now.
Guys, don't forget there's food if you want to grab some food. Yeah, it's literally just fine. Thank God. The one up there.
So it's like we teaching them computer science and stuff like that.
Right. I'm actually thinking about going to like my high school and doing like a cybersecurity talk.
That'd be really good.
Like at the program class. But I haven't been there in like 5 years, so they might not know who I am, but we'll see.
Find a teacher you think that you might have liked you.
Yeah.
Oh, cool! I can even a presenter screen. That makes it a lot easier. I can pull a Nick and use one projector and read off of the other one. Right behind the chair.
The fuck am I blocking? Oh, jeez,
Yep.
Just spin around in circles.
Cool. Can use that.
in. He's going to be doing iChat tool, which is a tool that he developed himself. He's going to be talking to you guys about it. This is the second time that we do a segment like this where somebody presents a tool. We should do it too. Yeah.
Very unexpected, but hey. So iChat tool, to give a quick overview of it, I just open sourced it about 3 hours ago, right before I came here. It's intentionally not public until now because it could be used as a post-exploitation tool for malware. What it does is it extracts the embedded images that are hidden inside of an OS X iChat file, and it dumps that whatever else content is in the file into a readable format into the terminal. What it can't do right now is make the file export into a usable format, mostly because there's other tools that exist to do that, and I'll show a few of them later. So why did I write this? Before I explain what an iChat file is. Forensics is that after going through the forensics course with Nick, didn't really see any forensics tools available for OS X whatsoever, and any that are were like, oh yeah, it's just a Linux thing, just like modify some variables here and you can point it to specific paths for OS X. And then there is almost no tools available to do any sort of data exfiltration for proprietary formats on OS X. I have to excuse me, I'm getting over the flu because studying for 4 or 5 exams in a week is not great. So the other point is security, is I personally think that OS X is really under-researched. People just kind of lump it into, oh, it's running Unix, therefore just all the same tools apply. I find that it's a little bit more unique. Apple has done a really unique job of saying, hey, here's your normal Linux skills. Yeah, throw them in the trash, and you have to use all of our specific tool sets. There's no package manager unless you install Homebrew and other things like that. But out of the gate, it's very protecting the user from themselves. So if you know semi-intermediate bash scripting, you're kind of okay on Mac, but you still have to have more complementary skills to go with it. The other huge part for it is iPhones are a really popular attack vector or surface that people want to attack, especially with the Checkmate tool being released to change the boot ROM and all that stuff. But I think they're potentially looking in the wrong spot. And you can exploit a lot of the things that Apple has designed for ease of use into a attack vector. So for those of you who don't know or don't have Apple devices, good job. Those of you who do, if you have an iPhone and a Mac OS, some version somewhere, iMessage on your desktop and on your phone sync. They sync through iCloud. Now that's normally a secure process, but if you say, hey, I've now got access to a phone, but I want all their text messages, you can't get into it because that's inside of the secured area on an OS or an iOS device. When you go to an OS X machine, it's not secured at all. So that's what this tool kind of complements some other stuff. So why does this work and what does it do before I go deep diving into technology? So iMessage data is stored in the user's home library folder. This contains all like the metadata, system files. Think of it as like any in Linux, your dot folder in your home directory. So it's like .ssh holds your SSH files and all that. .vim holds your vim configs. So inside of library messages, the data is stored there, but you can get an entire text message history from anyone just from a SQLite file called chat.db, which is in the root of the library messages folder. And kind of tying it back to the news segment, the changes that were made in OS X Catalina make my job a lot harder because it makes you force grant privileges to access that folder to any app, including system apps, meaning Terminal also needs privileges to access this folder. So you can't ls into this folder, you can't do anything. It says permission, operation not permitted. It makes you bang your head on a desk. Chat.db is just a SQL database of no actual images. Has quite a bit of information, such as references to file names for attachments that were sent in the file, or sent in the chat, such as images, attached files, or even emoticons that were larger, or bitmojis, or whatever. It has full chat transcripts, user conversation titles and names, which is kind of unique. They're stored device local, so your name on iOS has to be synced up to iCloud and then back down in order to show on your device, but so that's stored in the chat.db file. Back to the image references, it's really only showing a pointer or just a straight file path inside of home library messages attachments. And inside of that, it's a really weird hex file format. I haven't figured out any sort of reason or rhyme for it. But they're only cached for 30 days. So if you want a text message that was over 30 days ago, there won't be stored images. But you will have the texts. But you're like, oh yeah, someone sent this really incriminating photo of them stealing credit card information. Like, hey, I'm a criminal. You won't get that right off the bat out of those folders because those files are cached only for the 30 days, mostly to save disk space. There is a separate way to handle this, the archives folder. As soon as OS X receives data down from iCloud, it downloads it into what they call an iChat file, which is an archive of the entire conversation for a 24-hour period. Every single day, it breaks off a new one and it archives the previous day. What these iChat files are, they're actually glorified plist files, which is an Apple proprietary list called the property list file. The property list file is viewable, or sorry, an iChat file in the root format is viewable on OS X natively, but it has some limitations on what it is. The iChat file themselves have a really, really horrible format. Some things on this are readable, like you can say, oh hey, over here, you can say, it came from Caitlin Walsh at 97@gmail.com. That's the iCloud account that was attached to this. Thankfully, this is all taken with permission from my girlfriend because I don't use iOS. This isn't something I bother with. You can also see things like, where else is it in there? The phone number that this is sent to. So it was sent to a 416 number. Oop. In this, you also see a notice of Adobe XML and information from a header from what looks like an image. You can see the B and, which notes that it is likely a PNG file. This data really sucks to parse unless you have an Apple machine handy. You can just open up the file. So what does it look like and what does it do natively? So if you open it on the same computer that has the chat.db file that you're extracting all this information from, it will, and they're provided they're still in a local cache, it will display them inline in the chat box. If they're not, a broken image reference will appear like you have a normal HTML. But if you're on a different computer, broken image reference guaranteed. It will not try to resolve the image. But the images are actually still inside the plist/iChat file. They're very large images, like 2 or 3 megabytes, and you'll notice that because the iChat file will be several megabytes, or in some cases, several dozens of megabytes. On a different computer, you don't get any of the metadata that's stored on the chat.db file, like the conversation name, profile picture, attachments, names, or anything like that. You also, you also lose all of the information natively other than the text, the timestamps, and the phone number. So what does it look like? On the same computer, you can see, this is 2 different files, by the way, mostly just for the content reasons. It will show that you say, oh, hey, look, you can see the person that is conversing with, the date and time for it, as well as the date and time for every message that was sent and received, as well as the chat message, including sender receiver. If you open this on a different computer, you only see the phone number that's attached to, broken image reference, and text messages that were sent. And depending on it, sometimes received, depending if it was cached. So the other part for this that's really interesting, not what I wanted. So I'm going to grab a quick 5-second demo out of this. So this is a commercially available plist viewer. I had to rename the file from a .iChat file to a .plist file. And what you see inside is a plist file. It's just a glorified XML file. And it's just a really big XML file. Oh, partway down, you see a massive base64 encoded string. This file is basically the entirety of the string. If you were doing the ISSessions CTF from last year, you would notice that this is kind of familiar because I made a CTF challenge that you had to extract the image that was encoded inside this file. And it was not easy. You have to extract that base64 string, rip it out, realize, oh wait, this is another binary file, deal with that. So let's go through it. Really long base64 string. I'm not going to scroll down through the entirety of it. But the other part of it is that when you extract it, you get this one. If you try and open it, it should be a plist file because it's a nested plist, but it says RTFD for read the freaking docs because it doesn't match the format. So opening this up in a hex editor, such as cheating using Sublime and then enabling hex view, let's hope it renders. There we go. So when you open this up, you will notice a little bit of interesting things. It has some information that matches the previous plist file. That's interesting. But then you notice there's an entire 0 section for a really long time until it gets to one very specific offset. Offset 1000. And at offset 1000 in hex is when it starts an image file. From offset 1000 is a very interestingly consistent value. Regardless of what type of image, it is always starting at offset 1000 and continues on until the very end of the file. So to go back into that means that once you extract all that information, you get, please don't put it from the start. Oh no. So that offset becomes a really important value because it means that, hey, I know an offset exists, so if I see a massive base64 string, I can say, oh wait, that's probably an image, and I extract that, and then, okay, now let's make a new value of it and make it from 1000 down, and take that file and extract that as an image. And that, more or less, is what iChat does. So I have a couple of demo files. So these iChat files are 1 3/4 and 2.5 megs each. And running iChat tool will dump out the entire plist file just like we saw in the XML viewer. However, when it ever finishes, it will dump out an image file. And that image file is the encoded image that was hidden inside the file. So if we go back and we say, okay, let's grab the image that this was. Can you present from here?
Bottom.
Forgot.
Bottom, yeah, there.
So this is the image in the right file. So that's the image that was attached, which previously was listed as a broken image, when in reality it actually exists in the file. So doing that allows us to extract images from files that we would not normally expect them to have. We can also do this for the other one, which dumps out the exact same information. And I'll go over the actual body of what these things are, because it's a little bit interesting of saying, hey, what's this, what's that? This then dumps out this one. Oh, that's the same one, the other one. Another image that was encoded in the file. So what these actually are is different, it's a key value file that is time sensitive. So the order in which the file is read in is the chronological order of the data coming out of it. But the keys are root values inside of the XML tree, but so are the values. So they're both at the same level, and it kind of makes parsing a little bit interesting, so I haven't made a good solution for that. But you also get like a lot of metadata out of this that could be really useful for forensics that might be interesting. And my future updates and kind of ideas for this would be to exploit the plist to an actually usable format instead of XML, like a spreadsheet or a database or something that could be sorted or searched. And the other thing I haven't done, but it could very quickly be done, is searching for iChat files and dumping them out and extracting all the information from them. The main reason I haven't released this until now is because the volume of information you can get from this is potentially malicious. So if you have, say, a post-exploitation computer for someone who ran malware, and you have some sensitive information in your text messages that, like, oh, I don't know, maybe you sent someone a password or you sent someone some photos that were questionable, then you may not want that information used against you for some of like the sextortion emails that are fake, but who knows, they actually could be real if someone accessed your computer like that. And then the exposure for this could be used as a forensics tool. That's what I initially wrote it as, because I was curious of like, hey, how hard would it be? It's written in Golang, because Golang compiles to native code for any operating system I want, and is really fast for byte operations, which I liked, but I didn't want to write C, because who writes C? And any suggestions or questions for it?
Yeah, do you have any questions? Comments?
So how does Max handle like deleting or shredding the files? Like by default, it's just a.
So that was actually kind of what spurred this off. My girlfriend's sister said, hey, I deleted a file. Can you make sure I actually deleted it? But what she did is on her phone deleted the chat. And when that syncs back to iOS or iCloud, it downloads and says, hey, I want to delete this file. And what it does is it actually just sets a flag in the chat.db file. So it still exists, and that's why I was like, can I get more information out of that? And it's actually a record column in the database that says is deleted, 1, 0. Well,
yeah, on my phone, those text messages from 2017 that you were showing are not on my phone anymore. They're gone. So I could probably scroll way back on my computer, but I wouldn't think to do that.
yeah, I grabbed those an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
They're very readily accessible in OS X. If you try and delete the only way I know to actually properly remove these files is if you reinstall OS X with a different Apple ID. If you have the same Apple ID, it's just re-downloading it all over again. And then this is another thing that could be used as an attack vector is joining a new OS X computer to an Apple ID you want to attack, meaning you now download all of their chat history. So you no longer have to break into a phone.
If the original image had metadata in it, would it be preserved?
Yep. Yep. It still has EXIF information. It's the exact image that was sent. It also has geotag data if it's enabled, which I found really scary. That was one of the cool things I found about it.
For the, as you said before, you took the data from your girlfriend's phone. But how did you manage to capture it? Did you have to physically plug in your phone on your computer and take the images from there, or what did you?
No, it's on the computer right now. I can demo it on that computer if I need to just open up the Finder window. I use it from Terminal because I just like copy it from a specific directory. The layout of the archive directory is really, really stupidly simple. It's a date formatted folder for every conversation in that date.
And how does the script handle images from different chats?
Every chat is saved as a different iChat file, so you can extract it individually. One of the other parts that I wanted to do, but I didn't demo it, is that it won't extract just one image, it'll extract every image that it finds in the file. So if you have multiple or whatever, or if someone tries to hide it and like maybe messes with some bytes, I still see the byte value in going through Golang, and it's like, okay, grab it and anything that matches the header of a JPEG, GIF, PNG, or one other file, I forget. SVG. Yeah, SVG.
Sorry, dumb question. When you say a chat,
Yes.
how does it distinguish? Is that like party to party, or is that like multiple?
If it's party to party, like one person to one person, that's what chat. And then if you have like a group chat, that's also another conversation. Basically, any conversation you have in your phone for like text messaging, like, oh, I want to SMS a group message or anything like that, every conversation group is a separate iChat file.
Is it just iOS to iOS, or is it iOS to anything?
It's any file or any outbound or inbound messages coming from that Apple ID.
It's not just it's not just iMessage, it's like text messaging. Like, iMessage I thought would be treated kind of differently as opposed to regular.
Right,
text
yeah.
messaging,
It's iMessage is just the platform that I'm using to exploit because iMessage can send SMSs or iMessage. Yeah. So I can grab both of those.
So does it include other apps such as Facebook Messenger or Snapchat or?
No. So the only reason I could do this is because Apple does not care or it doesn't sync that data back to your OS machine. So if you have like Facebook Messenger and if that's saved data locally, then you could probably extract it, but then you have to deal with encryption. It's just Apple doesn't encrypt this.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Leslie. Next. Next up we have Philip. Phil, that's going to be speaking with his experience in computer forensics and incident response.
Boards that are up here. No wonder this stuff kind of gets
It gets a little janky.
Yeah. I'll take
This kind of pop speaker notes somehow. They're broadcasting it.
Is this on me?
Word.
If anyone wants any sandwiches left over, then feel free to grab some. Please, try to get rid of them.
So many screens. Hold on.
There are so many screens.
There are many screens.
It's like screen inception.
Yes. It's supposed to give you all of you a seizure. It's
about there does
something
not
about the.
fucking like it. Yeah.
It's like the video encoder along with the.
Love to use iOS.
I'll get this.
I do not, but that would have been perfect.
It's partly why I can't even stop using iMessage at all.
Yeah.
Because I've done this, like I did this about 6 months ago, but like in a concept level, and did like automated.
Too many windows.
Which was a pain in the ass. But when they showed it, I'm like, hey, look what I did. She's like, okay, we're not doing that.
Trying to figure out what part is happening at what time.
Yeah.
Because you just unplugged and yet it's still running over here.
Well, that's the delayed stream that's going on.
Yeah.
6 years ago.
I didn't have my life together, so I
It's all
need
good,
help.
man. It's all good. Okay, now if I go presenter mode. And now if I bring this over here, full screen.
Hey. Solid. Solid.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm just gonna make this a little bit bigger.
But otherwise you're good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I guess we're gonna start. I seem to have hit the table too hard. And
It said projector. Yeah.
okay.
It didn't like
just
what you
don't
did.
touch anything, and you're good, man.
Yeah. All right.
Not even the keyboard.
Man, that's so huge. So my name's Phil. Please take note of the topic warning. A lot of digital forensics can cover a lot of different interesting places and sometimes not so great places. So if anybody wants to leave, you have time now. Nope. All right. Sounds good. All right. So my name's Phil. I'm a fourth year-ish. I'm on co-op right now with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, in their digital forensics and incident response team. It's my fifth year technically at Sheridan. I bridged in from the software development and network engineering program. And so far, my work history is a lot of RBC when I was in software development. And then I worked here at the school for research, developing BLE beacon tracking. Like it says, I have a wife and a dog. That's about it. That's me in a nutshell. It's just wife and dog and a permanent student. So digital forensics and incident response, or DFIR, is basically two sort of realms of work. They're often kind of lumped together. Digital forensics commonly deals with civil actions like lawsuits around things like IP theft, hacking, Things that technically could be criminally tried, but a lot of times businesses just want to deal with it civilly. Incident response is generally like a reactive attitude. In my experience so far, which has not been really that long, it's been a lot of breaches and ransomware. And a lot of breaches don't turn out to be breaches, luckily, which is nice. They just turn out to be people doing things they're not supposed to. Why am I talking to you? Other than the fact that there was a speaker spot open and I just wanted to do something. Kind of feel like forensics gets like a short end of the stick kind of vibe. Like it doesn't, it's because it's not like as exciting as like red teaming seems to be or penetration testing. It doesn't sort of get like a lot of notice. And a lot of students and stuff like I know that they don't really think of digital forensics as like a opportunity for a career, especially when they kind of separate it from InfoSec. Even though like the fundamentals of like every capture the flag event is almost 100% like forensics, because you're digging for things, the exact sort of skill set that you need for forensics. What might you get up to in forensics? For big companies, it's a lot of Windows forensics, a lot of looking at things like LNK files, a lot of looking at things like shell bags, parsing through stuff, just trying to find anything that you can do to get a narrative going to help you explain what's happened. Timestamp analysis, which is, if you know anything about timestamps, it's super annoying because all timestamps sort of run differently. Log analysis, weirdly enough, I got to do bug sweeping in like the first week of my co-op. A school board called us and said, well, we have a listening device in our office. So we show up, we got this thing called a noodle, which it detects like two different unlike metals. And we show up and they take us up to the office and there's the bug right there. It's just a walkie-talkie, just plugged in, just chilling there. It's not turned on, it's not broadcasting, it's just there. Rating businesses, kinda, like I said, not quite, but kinda. Rating homes, also kinda, and a ton of imaging. It's a very sort of core part of the practice. If you're interested in this kind of job, there's a lot of room for like actual coding development. As you mentioned, there's not a ton of tools, and a lot of them are actually kind of old. You said there's not a lot of Mac tools. There is basically one big one, it's called Blackbag or Blacklight, and it's like $3,600, so it's kind of understandable that there's really nothing going on. So there's a lot of room to sort of create custom tools, just custom scripts, anything that you think kind of will help you get over any kind of problems you're running into, and it's really only limited to your own technical limitations. So some of the exciting things, like I know that red teaming and pen testing obviously has like the dopamine hit of, oh shit, I cracked that system, I'll pound them or whatever, so I'm in. Forensics doesn't really have that. Has sort of like a different thing, like dealing with potentially massive litigations, just generic legal battles, dealing with cases like corporate espionage or even treason. Anton Pillar orders, which sort of references the previous one, raiding businesses and raiding people's homes. Anton Pillar orders are essentially a civil search warrant. So you get to show up, and it's not like a no-knock search warrant. You're not kicking down the door being like, we're from PwC, we're gonna take your shit. It's more like, we'd like to take your stuff, please. And here's a lawyer. He's gonna take your shit, not us. And then sometimes it's very quick, sometimes it's 8 hours later that you actually get to go in and take some stuff. But it is still very, very interesting. I did an Anton Pillar order in northern Alberta against an oil company and a dude's residence. And the oil company that we raided, so to speak, went in there, prepped for like 60 devices, tons of computers. There's like 2. Not a lot, but in going through drawers, found a very large selection of workplace-themed porn, like hard drilling, hard hats, pumping oil, and it's just like, why do you guys have this at work? I did because I'm a co-op student and you never really know the answer to the questions until you ask them, I did bring like the project manager over. I'm like, do I have to image these? Like, can I just take them? Just fun, things to bring around. Some of the other sort of fun stories that I could so like some of the other observations that I can kind of give you from being not, like I said, very deep into it, but there's a lot of porn, lots of it. And you're gonna see, if you do this kind of job, a lot of it. Sometimes that porn is professionally made porn. Sometimes that porn is amateur porn. Sometimes that porn is a 17-year-old's obsession with hentai furries that you have to go through because, so basically the story is these two kids fished their teachers in high school and got the credentials and basically ran amok in like the system and posted some stuff that they shouldn't have. But this kid, because he took screenshots and like of his code, you have to go through all of his images. And so it's like, okay, so furry porn, screenshot. Furry porn, screenshot. So it's like this never-ending, like, oh, geez, that's a lot. Now, this was an Anton pillar that happened before I got there, but I had to do, me and the other co-op student from here as well, had to do a lot of the analysis on this. His unpleasant task was the father of one of these kids had been divorced for a bit and had got up to making a lot of his own angles, so he described it as basically like an ongoing, like just flopping arc of photos that he basically was going through. And it's just like 1, 2, 3, back and forth. And it's just like this dong photos forever and ever and ever. So like things like that can be kind of funny. Maybe tragic and scarring, but also maybe kind of funny. So like you can see like a lot of weird shit. Anton pillars can lead you into some, that same oil company, the other team that was at the guy's house, found several loaded firearms in unsafe places, like his nightstand, and he had like a 6-year-old kid that was like kicking around, and definitely wasn't like locks on any of his doors. So, what else? So, bug sweeping. I got a good story. Like that same bug sweeping event. We went out, searched 4 offices. We're supposed to search 4 offices, searched 3. Came back to do the 4th office a couple days later. Even though obviously it was a waste of time and money. It doesn't matter. They're paying for it. Who cares? Show up, and the person's office, they're not there. So we get the noodle out again. So stress the fact that it detects 2 unlike metals, right, that are touching. Basically, I think a resistor or transistor. But so we're going through. It's in a big office of a school board that's attached to a high school. So this person technically has nothing to do with like the student body for the most part, but scan in the office, come up to his desk, go under the desk, and it pings on this big briefcase that is like a legal briefcase. So like the big open void, no shelves kind of thing. So I pull it out, gotta look inside. Open it up, and it's filled to the brim with black butt sex toys. Just all anal sex toys. And the plethora of questions that go through your head are like, why is this at work, man? Also, was it just too hot in your car? Would this stuff melt? Like, I don't really know. But, so basically put it immediately right back. Didn't say anything until it got back. And then their lawyer called and we're like, you didn't take photos, right? As long as you could see it, just didn't take photos. So we're like, no, I didn't take any photos. So those are like some of the observations you can kind of gather from forensics. There is a lot, like I said, a lot of interesting stuff to do on the technical analysis side as well. Building custom tools, I'm in the process of building right now a tool that parses out USB data because most of the commercially available ones kind of suck, and the most of the freeware ones kind of died at Windows 7. And Windows 10 kind of treats them just slightly differently. So there's like a lot of stuff to be done. There's a lot of room for growth. A lot of teams don't have a ton of people on them, and you have a lot of time to sort of make a big impact on the people you're working with. Now, admittedly, incident response has only been like 6 cases. Most of them have been breaches, and most of the time that's just been somebody in the company saw something they weren't supposed to because of a miscalculated or misapplied privilege. However, there is one that we've started just recently that was basically this company held client data, including social insurance numbers and driver's license, tons of very, very, very private PII type data. PII is personally identifiable information in just a generic mailbox. And somebody gave themselves permission to it because they had a sysadmin level, and then started applying for money mart loans using people's data. So that's pretty rough. One of the bigger things that I could sort of draw from my times on incident response is that there's a lot of people that have been hired into sysadmin positions that have no idea what they're doing, or at least not a great handle on it. Like, we had one in Northern Alberta again, where somebody they didn't understand that if you put like a group or a person into the root of the privilege set, that they got access to everything below it. So that was fun. Basically, a conclusion is that the career so far seems pretty interesting. It's something that I would encourage looking into, especially if you haven't had your co-op yet or anything like that. I know that PwC will be looking for another intern starting next summer. There's obviously huge companies that do it, like PwC, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG. There's smaller ones like Duff and Phelps, M&A, and then there's even smaller shops that do it on just a very specific basis. If you kind of want that small team vibe, all the way up to I want to be in a giant company. And then shameless plug, PwC is currently looking for a manager in this exact field. More on the incident response, so if anybody has that kind of skill set or wants to gain that kind of skill set and has been in any kind of industry for a while, come see me after. Otherwise, I don't really have a questions one, but you can go ahead and ask questions.
So for anybody wanting to look into this type of field, what do you suggest to prepare them for going into forensics?
So if you're going to go into forensics with a big company like PwC, honestly, it's a lot of Windows forensics. So really, really comfortable with the understanding of how Windows forensics works.
Windows is in the OS or just like a normal Windows?
No, Windows is in the OS, yeah. Just because the incidence of a Mac-based acquisition or analysis on a Mac, unless you're taking people's personal devices, which does occasionally happen, most big businesses that you're going to deal with are using Windows endpoints. So understanding Windows, understanding Windows-based servers even, because I don't know why, but everybody uses Windows Server. Linux stuff is important, but not really as important. So heavy on that. And then the nice and yet kind of bad part is that a lot of the tools that are out there now are pretty much plug and play, but they also kind of give you not enough of the information you're looking for at any one time, but they give you a lot. So luckily, if you don't really have a ton of background, tools can kind of get you halfway there, and then you can kind of learn off of it. But yeah, Windows forensics is basically the core of it, and then branching up from there. You had a question?
Most of the companies that are financial institutions.
Professional services is technically what they are, but yeah, you're right.
Is that where the demand is, or?
So all of the ones there, KPMG, EY, they're not technically banks, they're professional services. Now the bulk of what they do is auditing for tax auditing is a huge one. Auditing for compliance, that's a big part of their business. But they all offer tons of different ones. And for example, KPMG also actually PwC also offers mobile SOC or that kind of concept of like third-party SOC. They also offer red teaming and penetration testing. They offer a ton of different services. It's just not like their highlight services. It's not what they're arguably known for, but it is like a big part of still what they do.
So would computer forensics be like what you see on TV?
As in like, no, I mean, I don't even know. I don't like, you mean like CSI stuff? I mean, no, probably not. Not in any way. Like, there's no criminal activity that we like. Arguably, everything we're doing is criminal, but and then at the same time, none of it is because no one's going to jail. People are just getting sued.
Yeah, when these guys step in, it's usually when the dust has settled.
Yeah, commonly, like a lot of for like, especially incident response. Like, I thought at the first, a lot of incident response was going to be like, we show up and fix their problem for them. More often than not, they've already kind of got a handle on at least capping the issue. What they want to know is how it happened because they don't trust their own team who probably created the issue in some way to diagnose and say, oh, it's our fault or their fault. So for the most part, especially incident response is not too often about fixing their problem. It's about why did it happen, what kind of information got exposed. But yeah, usually it's shit's already happened, and then you show up, especially for forensics, because stuff has to happen in order to actually look into it. So.
And usually it's the instant response that goes in first, make sure everything's good, and then hands it off to forensics.
Or you're the same team, like we are. So, anybody else?
Yeah. How much exposure? How much exposure do you have on the legal side? Like, have they asked you to testify? Did they ask you to testify? Did they bring
So,
anything into you?
in civil stuff, like for PwC and stuff, it's not super common that people testify. It's more often than not signed affidavits. However, they're not going to ask a co-op student to sign an affidavit. So, not yet at least, maybe. But no, the technical people, for the most part, don't really do a lot. We have 3 ex-police officers that are all expert witnesses. So they'll do, like you do all the work and then they take that, write their name on the bottom and say, swear to this happened. And then that goes to court and it stands up, so, because they're expert witnesses.
Who ends up engaging you folks most of the time now? Like, is it the breach party's law firm, or is it insurance more now? Because, like, when I left the industry, breach insurance wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
So, always people hiring us were a law firm acting on behalf of the person who was breached.
Right.
You guys know what insurance is.
So, for the most part, it's still law firms. However, like the one we just got called to yesterday and today is an insurance company calling for a breach insurance policy. So, and we're trying to develop new sales bracelets. I don't really deal with that, but they're targeting a lot of the insurance companies now because of the policies that come out. Like the school board I mentioned, they were not super sweat. Like, I mean, we found that these kids got in, dug around, posted. Kind of like they were trying to be like white knights. They were posting like that this kid was bullying somebody else. But the school was basically like, we don't really care. We have an insurance policy. Don't really give a shit. So I thought that was kind of weird, but yeah, insurance is now a pretty big player in the hiring space. So, anything else?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you Phil for presenting. So thank you guys for showing up. For those of us of age, we're heading over to Monahan.